The announcement of the long-awaited Medieval 3 has most of us extremely excited, and even though the game is still in early pre-production, CEA has already underlined a more transparent approach to its development. With the latest development video, we have already learned about some interesting changes coming with Medieval 3, especially on the campaign map side of things. So far, most of the discussions from CEA themselves, other fellow content creators, and within the community has focused on campaign mechanics, systems, and depth. And that's great, but there's one vital thing that hasn't been talked about enough. Total War has always been about the battles. How the battles in Medieval 3 turn out will be the deciding factor between a heroic victory and a shameful display when the game finally releases. Of course, battles will be addressed later in development, but it cannot be stressed enough how important it is that they are the best we've seen in the franchise so far. Battles are what distinguish Total War from its competitors. They are the foundation of the series and the reason it has remained successful for over 2 decades. Don't get me wrong, the little we know so far about the campaign map sounds genuinely promising. Improvements on the campaign side absolutely matters, and they contribute a lot to the overall gaming experience. This could take Total War to the next level. But let's be honest, Total War cannot out-Paradox Interactive on campaign depth. Battles are its identity. At its core, the campaign map in Total War exists to give battles context and meaning. To put it simply, if the campaign map gameplay is mediocre but the battles are great, the game will likely succeed. If the campaign map is great but the battles are mediocre, the game will fail. A perfect example of this is a Total War saga Troy. Troy actually has a very enjoyable campaign map experience with interesting mechanics, but its battles are, in my opinion, among the weakest, if not the weakest, in the entire franchise. And that's the reason why I personally never went back to it. And clearly I'm not alone, the game hasn't seen a peak for over 1,000 players in years. You could argue that the time period also affects its appeal, and that's fair, but with the medieval setting, Medieval 3 is a slam dunk in that regard. So with all of this being said, let's talk about what actually matters when it comes to what makes a great Total War battle. Player agency. Tactics must mean more than just raw stats on unit cards. A great Total War battle is one where the outcome depends on what the player does. Formation, positioning, timing, when to commit reserves and when to pull units back. Those decisions must directly shape the outcome of the battle. Good tactical play should reward the player, making seemingly unwinnable battles possible and punishing mistakes just as clearly. Sometimes you don't simply have the numbers, and that's fine, but the best battles are the ones where you can look back afterward and immediately understand which decision won or lost you the fight. Clear unit roles and counters. A core strength of Total War battles has always been clear unit roles, an extended rock paper scissors formula. Infantry holds the line, cavalry flanks and shocks, missile punish exposed targets. When this works well, every unit has a purpose and a weakness, and the player is rewarded for using the right tool at the right time. When unit roles blur too much, battles turn into blobs where positioning barely matters. Great battles come from understanding your army and being punished when you misuse it. Unit diversity is important, and different cultures should feel distinct, but diversity for its own sake doesn't add much. Giving one unit a club instead of a sword means very little if the overall stats and battlefield role are almost identical, something I feel was an issue in both Troy and Total War Pharaoh. Unit diversity should create different tactical problems or opportunities for the player, not just visual variety. Importance of morale. Morale is one of those systems that largely works well already and should be maintained rather than reinvented. Troy is the main exception here. Battles shouldn't just be about killing every last soldier, they should be about breaking the enemy's will to fight. That makes sense from a realism perspective, but more importantly, it also makes sense from a gameplay perspective. Flanking, surrounding, killing a general, or routing unit and triggering a chain reaction, that's when battles become memorable. When morale matters, smart tactics can overcome stronger armies. Terrain and positioning matter. Terrain should create opportunities, not scripted obstacles. Terrain needs to play a meaningful role in every Total War battle. The battlefield should reflect where the battle takes place on the campaign map, and even the season and weather at the time. But it has to feel natural, not artificially designed to force specific outcomes. A good example here is the mud mechanics added in Trojan Pharaoh. Slowing down heavier units made sense mechanically and absolutely affected battles to some extent. The problem was that the mud often felt conveniently placed right in the center of the map or close to it, making the battlefield feel artificial rather than organic. High ground, forest, choke points, rivers, these should all meaningfully affect how the battles play out, and when terrain is used well, a weaker army in a strong defensive position should almost always stand a real chance, and that's when positioning becomes part of tactics, not just decoration. Responsive but punishable AI. This is one area where Total War has always struggled, and where the next big step forward really needs to happen. To reach that next level, battles needs better AI, but not perfect AI. The AI needs to be responsive, but punishable. A good Total War AI makes mistakes that observant players can exploit, like overextending, exposing its flanks, or charging at the wrong time. Being able to exploit a tactical mistake rather than a bugged or broken behavior is, or at least would, be incredibly rewarding. That's what makes the player feel clever. At the same time, the AI shouldn't feel passive or brain dead. The goal isn't perfect realism, but good gameplay. AI behavior that creates meaningful problems for the player to solve during the battle. One interesting way to deepen this would actually be tying AI behavior more closely to general skills. A poor general might be more prone to mistakes, while a great general could use more advanced tactics and respond better to the player's moves. This would also help prevent battles from becoming predictable or solvable by a single blueprint. Readable cause and effect. After a battle, the player should always understand why it turned out the way it did. Why did that unit rout? Why did this flank collapse? Why did the enemy army suddenly crumble? Clear feedback, visually and mechanically, is essential. When outcomes feels random or unclear, frustration replaces satisfaction. Great battles teach the players something every time they play. Tactical pacing. A great Total War battle has phases. Deployment matters, the initial engagement matters. There's a moment where momentum can shift and eventually collapse or a breakthrough. When battles snowball instantly or drag on forever, that pacing is lost. The best battles here gives the player time to react, adapt, and make meaningful decisions throughout, not just in the first 30 seconds. At the same time, battles can't take too long from a gameplay perspective. Not everyone has time for hour-long engagements. But say if large battles could genuinely break an enemy faction instead of being followed by 2 new stacks a few turns later, then longer, more decisive battles might actually be worth it, simply because there would be a fewer of them. Battles that matter to the campaign. Battles needs weight. Winning or losing should matter beyond the battlefield. Losing an army should hurt. Winning a decisive engagement should change the direction of the campaign. Enemy stack spamming and the ability for both the AI and the player to quickly raise new armies makes battles feel disconnected from the wider campaign. In a campaign context, I want the ability to create my own Hastings, Bannockburn, or even Agincourt. Battles that truly matters. Visuals that support gameplay. Visuals are not just about spectacle, they support readability, immersion, and tactical clarity. Matched combat animations, believable unit collision, a well-executed formation, all help battles feel alive when zoomed in. At the same time, formations and movement needs to remain readable when zoomed out. Color palette also matters more than people often realize, I think, because battles shouldn't look overly pretty, right? Nor should they look overly dull. In my opinion, Total War Attila strikes this balance the best, and many earlier titles do this as well. Things started to drift, in my opinion, with Total War 3 Kingdoms. We have the ability to choose between romance mode that looks vibrant but slightly too fantasy, even if it makes some sense, while records mode aims for realism but ends up just feeling too dull. The sweet spot, in my opinion, would lie somewhere in between, and getting that right should be taken seriously. Visual clarity is a part of good battle design, not an afterthought. Medieval 3 really has the potential to be something truly special. Campaign improvements do matter, but battles will decide everything. If CA gets this right, Medieval 3 could define the series for the next decade. Don't forget this, CA. This is Total War.